Are you sick and tired of clicking around in Dataverse and waiting for ages for things to load when you need to create a bunch of different tables? Well, you don't actually have to, because there's a way that you can create things with natural language and it's really fun, it's really quick. So, Josh, can you tell us a bit more about this technology that we can use to do this cool stuff?
Absolutely. So the technology that we're talking about today is MCP, or Model Context Protocol. It's quite a mouthful, but let's not worry about what that actually is just now and talk about what it is that it actually solves. So with AI assisted development, if you wanted AI to talk to an external tool or data source, you would have to build that connection from scratch. Every model agent needs its own custom integration. If you were thinking of USB charger connecting to a port, you'd have to have a different one for every device. But then Anthropic, the company behind Claude, the AI tool, thought, why don't we standardize that? So they then created a protocol called MCP. And effectively, that's your USB socket for AI, right? It allows your AI tools to interface with your APIs and, get that information back. So a API for AI, if you will. So with that in mind, we can use AI with MCP to connect to our data, retrieve, update, delete, write, whatever we want to do. And that's MCP in a nutshell. So with that in mind, why would we want to use MCP for Dataverse?
So, we could use an agent to communicate with the Dataverse Web API, but that agent's going to have to go and look at the documentation and figure out exactly what it can achieve. Whereas with an MCP server, that MCP server is going to be telling AI, it's going to give it a list of tools. And all of those tools have a short description against them. So the agent will immediately be able to tell what it can perform, what it can do with that MCP server. So what it can do with Dataverse. So it's going to use less context and it's going to be quicker.
Now that makes sense. So we can make more effective calls by using MCP, right? And by proxy of that, we're then going to probably have more efficient token management and more efficient calls with our AI tooling, which is great. So Dataverse MCP, it went GA fairly recently, if I recall, and it can do some really cool things. And as I discovered recently, it removes all of that ClickOps frustrations that I've had for years building Dataverse solutions, and I'm sure you're the same. We jump into the demo and just show how cool this is and how you can leverage the MCP to actually remove ClickOps altogether from this.
All right. So the first thing that we have to do before we actually connect to an MCP server is we have to go into the documentation and understand how do you actually set it up, because it's not just going to work. And so the first thing we need to do is go to documentation and then read through where it says connect to Dataverse with Model Context Protocol. And then within here, we've got different ways that we can connect to it. So we could use a Copilot Studio agent to use the Dataverse MCP server. But what we're wanting to do here is just bring it into GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio Code or VS Code. So if I click on that, then it gives us the instructions for it. So the prerequisites. So we need to make sure that it's allowed in the environment. So that's the first thing. So let's go and do that. So we're in the environment here. We've created a brand new environment called Dataverse MCP. We need to go into the settings, and then we need to go into features. And then if we scroll down, we get to a point where it says Dataverse Model Context Protocol. And then in here, we already have it saying allow MCP clients to interact with the MCP server. So that's great. There's also a preview version. I'm not exactly sure what's available in the preview version, but we don't really want to use that because it's in preview. So then the next thing we need to do is we need to allow the MCP clients. So we click on advanced settings, and then that's going to open up a model-driven app for us. So then now that the model-driven app has loaded up, we can see that we've got Microsoft Copilot Studio app, Microsoft GitHub Copilot app, and the GitHub Copilot one is not enabled. So of course, pretty straightforward. We just go and enable that, save and close, and then now it's enabled on our environment. So now we can actually get it set up in VS Code. So before we get into VS Code, the first thing we want to do is just make sure that we know our environment URL, because we're going to need that to connect to it. So I'll just right click on that. I'm in the admin center just looking at the environment. You can also do it from make.powerapps.com. If you go to your session details in the settings cog, then you can copy it from there. So now let's go into VS Code. So now that we're in VS Code, the next thing we want to do is add the MCP server. So I can go up to the menu and go to View Command Palette, or you can press Control-Shift-P. And then when you're there, if you start typing in MCP or add server, it will come up. It was already there for me, but I just wanted to show you how you can search for it. And then we've got it here. So we do add server. And then you get given a few different options. And the one that you want for the Dataverse MCP server is HTTP. So then it's asking us for the URL. And this is where we paste in our Dynamics URL. But we also need to add API because it's an API that we're connecting to. And it's the MCP version of the API that we want to connect to. So once we've pressed enter, then it's going to give us the option to give it a name. I always write in Dataverse MCP or Dataverse MCP server. It just means that when you're interacting with it, you're 100% sure that it's the one that you want to use.
Based on that, I guess it's important to note as well that we're connecting to one environment here, but you could have the MCP connecting to multiple environments. So having a friendly name, maybe with an environment identifier, could be a good idea as well if you're planning on interacting with multiple environments going forward.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's something that I hadn't even considered. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And then the other side to it, when you reach this point, is like, do you want that MCP server available everywhere, or do you just want it available in this workspace? So just within this folder that we're working on. So I always choose workspace. I don't want to litter my whole environment, like my whole computer, with loads of MCP servers. So I tend to keep my MCP servers scoped within a project unless there's a brilliant reason to do it wider than that. So now it's saying that it wants to authenticate to Microsoft, and I'll click on allow, and then it's asking me which account I want to use. So I've already got an account on here for it. I can click on that, and then it's authenticated to that. Now, if I just scroll up a bit, you can see the details about this MCP server. So here are all of our MCP servers that we've got in our mcp.json, which is in our .vs Code folder. And we only have the one because we've only added one. And you can see that we've got some details at the top here where it shows details about this Dataverse MCP server. So it's running at the moment. We can stop it. We can restart it. It's got 10 tools available to it. And if we click on more, then we get some other options within VS Code that we can use, like disconnecting our account if we wanted to. So yeah, Josh, that's our MCP server up and running. What would you do next?
I would probably want to know what tools are available. Of course, we could check the documentation, but that's not really fun. So why don't we ask AI if it can tell us what tools are available?
Sounds good to me. So we'll open up the chat. We'll just expand it into full screen. And then now we can interact with our Dataverse MCP server. What tools are available to the Dataverse MCP server?
So it's now working, isn't it? It's figuring out what tool to use based on what you've just asked it. So it'll run through and hopefully return just at the right time the tools that are available, which is good.
Yeah, so it looked within our MCP configuration and it found the mcp.json file that we were just looking at, realized that there was a Dataverse MCP server available to us, communicated with it, and then it came back with all of these different tools that we have access to. So things like listing tables, describing tables, reading queries, so we can query the data, we can create tables, update them, records. Yeah, there's quite a bit we can do. But not tons we can do. So a quick breakdown is there. What should we do, Josh?
If it was me and I was using the tool, I'd maybe want to check and see if I can actually see that it's interacting with our environment. So one thing I like to do personally is just say, can you list the tables available in my environment?
Using the Dataverse MCP server, can you list the tables in my environment? So while this is going through using the Dataverse MCP server and it saved the result in a file, I'm just going to show you all something. So in our chat window, we've got configure tools here. If I click on that, then this will open up all of the tools that are available to GitHub Copilot. So if I scroll down, you can see that I've got things like the Azure MCP, I've got Foundry MCP, and I've of course got our Dataverse MCP server here, and then other things that I've installed. So looking at the check marks by here, you can see what is what's enabled, and it's 92 selected. And you want to be careful that you don't have too many MCP servers up and running, because if you have too many up and running, well, for one, there is actually a finite limit, but for two, GitHub Copilot agent's going to have to bring all of that into context. It's going to load all of that in order to understand whether it should be using something based on your discussion that you've had with it. So only enable the ones that you truly want for the project that you're working on. So now we've got this amazing list. It's put it in a very interesting way because there are 617 tables. So yeah, it hasn't really put it in a very good format for us. What should we do next?
I think For me, it proves the point that it's retrieved the tables, but I wonder if we can see any data in these tables. And I don't think there will be any data, but we can check, right? So why not? And using the accounts table, let's see if there's any accounts. And if there isn't, we could maybe add some.
Can you return all of my accounts records? So this time I'm not telling it to use the Dataverse MCP server, and we'll see whether, because of the context of our previous conversations, it understands this is what I'm looking for, which it does. All right. It said that the first query returned no rows, which is what we expected, and double checked that there aren't any records in there. So it counted them as well. It said that there aren't any in there. So that's absolutely fine. It then says, if you want, I can also check related tables or help insert a sample account record. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yes, let's go and create a Power Squared account in this table.
Let's do that. Should we? Okay, I have an idea. Can you create an account record that is for Power Squared Limited and also 9 other records that you can decide on the names for yourself?
So what's interesting here is that it almost batches the create record. So it has to call the tool every time that you want to create a record. So that could be problematic, but it kind of understands that if I try and create all 10 at once, I could overwhelm the endpoint. So it batches it. It's intelligent enough to know that, which I think is really cool.
It's clever, yeah. And like, as you say, you might hit API limits if you tell it to do 1,000 at once. It's going to do 1,000 queries to the database. Whereas if you were using, say, the Dataverse Web API, you would probably put all of those into batches that would be done in chunks. So it would be done much quicker and with less queries. So yeah, I guess that's a limitation of it. But if you think about the result, that's amazing. Like, very quickly got the Dataverse MCP server up and running, and very quickly we've got a Dataverse table that has data in it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'm a bit of a skeptic. Can we check that the records exist in Dataverse if we go over to the accounts table?
So we've gone into the Dataverse MCP environment, as you can see in the top right-hand corner up there, and we have our account table here. So if we click on it, fingers crossed, we've got our 10 records that we created, which we do.
Perfect. That's always reassuring to see it there, isn't it? I think that's just that kind of last bit of confirmation when working with the MCP server. You can see there's the Power Squared record there. We just rename that to make it correct. But let's shift gears. I like the fact that we can create records, but most of the time I'm not actually creating records. That's for the end users to do. I'm creating tables and schemas. Why don't we try that?
Yeah, that's a great idea. What would you like to create?
I want to create a app that users can record visits to my office. I think that would be quite a good one because it's only going to create a few tables and we can see what it does with some relationship stuff too. So should we try that?
I want to create a Dataverse structure for an app that's going to record visitor visits to my building, to my offices. Can you come up with a plan for this? So the reason why I'm guessing it to come up with a plan for this is because I just want to make sure it's not going to create too many tables. We might want to just pull it back a bit because otherwise it might decide to create numerous tables.
Like we can see there, it's maybe creating a few. Maybe we just want visitor, and host maybe to begin with.
Let me just ask it to dial it back to 3 tables. Yeah. Can you reduce the list of tables to just 3 tables? So this is much better for us. So we've got a building, a host, and a visit.
What's nice here is it's not only giving us the tables, it's giving us columns, the full schema, and also relationships. That's really cool.
And yeah, we've got things like choices. So let's see how it does with things like that. Thank you. I'm really happy with that. Can you create them in Dataverse now? And so we're asking it to do quite a bit here. So it's 3 tables with quite a few custom columns of varying types, including a choices column or multiple choices columns. And then once they're created, it will also create relationships for them. All right, so it's been working on the tables and it's created some. It did come up with an error because it tried to create them at the same time, which of course you can't do that because it locks Dataverse essentially when you're creating a table. So you have to wait for that creation to finish, then you can work on the next one. It figured that out, so that's great. And then it says the 3 base tables now exist. And then now it's asking us to approve something. So it wants to run an update. And it's wanting to add new columns. Now, the reason why it wants to add new columns is because, as I said before, it wants to create the relationships after creating the tables. So, yep, that sounds good. We'll let that go ahead and we'll see what happens next. And this is why it takes so long in make.powerapps.com, because it's having to wait for things to catch up. But at least if we're doing it this way, we could set this off and running and then we could go off and do something else and then we can come back to it. We're not sat there waiting for things to happen.
Nice. So it's doing quite a lot behind the scenes here. It's not just doing what we told it to do. It's actually done a little bit more than that, hasn't it? Which is interesting.
So it deleted the temporary test records and added a few realistic records. So that's pretty cool. Let's have a look. So we'll go back into our environment, and then under our tables, we will have some custom tables. So something that's really interesting here is that we've got 2 buildings. So it's maybe tried to create this one and it didn't like it. Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, not really too sure. It looks like it's got itself confused, doesn't it? Which is very odd, unless, building name. And what was the other one?
So it created this one first, and this one has the record in it. It created the other one second. So I guess the question is, which one is linked up to these? And it's probably that first one.
Yeah, so let's have a look.
So I guess that what we're noticing from this is that it's pretty good, but there are still some nuances and it's not perfect. It's giving us some really nice options. Josh, is it worth using this to build your production build? What do you think?
No. To put it bluntly, it isn't. And that's the frustrating part about this at the minute, isn't it? Because it has so much potential. But this is when the kind of limitations and the gotchas come in, most namely being, you can see there in the name column, and that it's not creating them in a solution, which isn't great. If I was doing this in a production instance, I'd want that to be with a publisher prefix and in a solution. It doesn't let us create certain column types, although it does the relationships. If you're wanting a prompt column or a paraphets column, then you're out of luck sadly at the moment. Also, you need to be in a managed environment to do this. And you need licensing as well. So you need Copilot credits to use the MCP server. So there's a few limitations that would maybe steer you away from using this in production instance at the moment. So there is updates to this happening all the time, but I think those quality of life ones, particularly around solution and prefixing, is something that needs to get fixed before we can even consider using this in a production instance. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Something that's interesting from our testing is that with the Copilot credits situation, we've been generating some Dataverse tables. Haven't used it heavily, but we've barely noticed any credits being used. So it was half a credits, I think, wasn't it? Or something along those lines. So from that perspective, it seems like it's probably not going to use much. So that's a good thing. The other thing is that this environment that we created is not currently a managed environment, but it's still allowing us to use the Dataverse MCP server. So I don't know what's up with that. Maybe at some point Microsoft are going to start enforcing it, because in their documentation, they do explicitly say it has to be a managed environment. But as you can see here, it seems to be working without it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's take the bad with the good. I mean, with that in mind, what it's actually done for us here is pretty awesome, and there's so much potential with this. So if you haven't had this on your radar, it is definitely something to keep on your radar for the future, because it is going to be really, really easy to create all of this stuff going forward. And you can see the power of it right now. So I'm really looking forward to this being something that I can use personally in production, and something that I can do in a very automated fashion, where I can just tell it to create my full solution, walk away, have a coffee, come back, and it's done.
And as you can see here, it has created this status choice column with different parameters to it. So this is a good thing because it can create a choice column, but then it's a bad thing because it doesn't recognize that there's already a column called status. Creating another one called status is just going to create confusion in the future. So it's these kinds of things that it's probably going to take a while before Microsoft fix something along those lines, because it's quite a complex thing. But if you've watched our previous video where we're talking about skills, you could very easily create a skill to interact with the Dataverse MCP server. And as part of that, you could check for existing columns and make sure that you're not creating a column that already has the same name. So it starts to get really cool there and really clever. So we don't necessarily need to rely on Microsoft for that side.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been really interesting. I hope you've enjoyed that walkthrough of what MCP is and how we can use it in Dataverse. If you found this useful, give us a thumbs up, do leave us a comment, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks.